revising the tax structure, the payroll tax?
Absolutely.
What do you think? What do you think that the business tax should look like?
There's been all kinds of different iterations of what that's going to look like, the combinations. I think there's individuals who don't like the payroll, who like the gross receipts and so on. I think that at the end of the day, what we're going to have to do is to be open to the idea that we're going to have to change that, what that complex of revenue that we need into the general fund is something that I'm going to bring stakeholders into this discussion. It's not as simple as I think a lot of people would like to believe. I mean, there are some individuals who like payroll. They want to keep the payroll. There are others who want gross receipt, but then there are others who don't like. So I think that there are going to be differences of opinion regardless of what kind of changes. It's a matter of figuring out what that complex is going to be.
Joanna, you also talked about restructuring the business tax, and that's something that I think has been discussed for about 10 years.
Yep.
10 years now. I think when Tony was supervisor, we were talking about changing the payroll tax. And one of the problems that we have regarding that is that, right now a small percentage of businesses pay taxes and a lot of other smaller businesses in San Francisco don't.
Yep.
And so then what you have is you can never get consensus between the chamber and small businesses. Is the reason why our tax structure has not changed is there has been a complete lack of consensus on what that tax should be. How do you change that?
With data to start. So, and I would use going back to the example I brought up about our efforts to attract biotech companies to Mission Bay. So we rolled back the payroll tax. We weren't taxing stock options. And so what has that generated in terms of revenue to the city by having those jobs located here? And I agree with you. Why are financial services firms and law firms exempt from, I know they pay at the state level, but we need to have a consistent structure. When I talk to a lot of business leaders who employ the 25% of our working population who commutes out of the city every day and say, what would it take for you to get you to locate those jobs closer to where your employees live? Having some of those jobs be in San Francisco. The consensus is we don't have to be equivalent to what it costs to, say, have that job located in Mountain View, but we have to be more competitive. And right now, because we've incremented it up so much, that we're not competitive. And the way that businesses talk to me about it, I hosted a series of roundtables with large companies and smaller, is that it adds about $5 to $7 per square foot of cost when they look at the payroll tax cost, and when they're thinking about an equivalent basis, that's the additional dollar amount it adds. So it's discouraging, having them stay here or pushes them out. I was even, if you go on the corner of Lombard and Fillmore is where a lot of the big buses come to take people down to mostly to the South Bay, and a guy was getting on the bus who worked for Deloitte. He said, actually, I'm going down. It was right before LinkedIn's IPO, and he said, I'm going down because we're working on the IPO. But he said, we have 6 clients in San Francisco that are preparing to go public who are all looking to move because of the tax on stock options. And so I would look at the data to say, what happens when we don't have it? It's 300 million. Well, I think it's 300 million. This is back to not getting consistently being able to get real access to the budgets. It's about 340 million in the business tax line in our city budget, of which some of that is also the cost of filing fees and other things. So how much of that is the payroll tax? I'm not sure what the specific number is, but it's not like it's a huge part of our budget on top of it. It's not.
I have one other question. Do you have a question?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Ranked choice voting. A few months ago, or last year, I worked in Oakland where we had a mayor's race. And due to the alliances of some of the contenders in the race, the presumed front runner, Senator Don Parada, lost because of the basically kind of allegiance of supporters of other candidates. This is a more complex race than that one, and
this is a little district headlight.
Yeah. It seems arguable to me that alliances like that are going to be all the more important in this race. To what extent is your campaign talking to other campaigns about making any such alliances publicly, and to what extent are you willing to say whether you'll recommend that your supporters support other candidates, and if so, who?
Leland, why don't you start?
Well, number one, I think the reality is we have ranked choice. That is the system that I am supporting. in regard to, whether or not we're going to coordinate down the road with different campaigns and candidacy. We haven't done that. This is the first time I've run a ranked choice, and so the timeline sort of is a little bit vague to me in terms of when and how you do that. But right now, in terms of the ranked choice, we have not established those kinds of alliances and so on yet.
Do you expect to?
I will wait to see how this campaign goes.
Tony?
It's a system that we're stuck with. We got to live with. It's complicated. I'm not sure everybody understands it. I'm running in this mayor's race as the only reform candidate, and again, we can argue about this later, as the only independent that is staking out certain positions that none of the other candidates are doing. So what alliances I can form with other candidates, I have to wait and see how far they come in my direction, because I'm really not interested in their positions in running government. I know why I'm running. And if I can get a couple of them that stand up and claim their independence from the status quo machine and have the courage to go against it, sure, I would talk to them. But I haven't seen that yet. So talk about alliances, hey, I'm just running for the people. That's my alliance.
Joanna?
I'm not stealing your lines.
I hope not.
In terms of running for the
You're
people.
overstarting.
No, so first of all, people always ask, if Ed Lee jumps in, what do you think? And I said it was 8 City Hall insiders, and that just makes it 9 in terms of who I'm running against. So welcome him. As I said in the beginning when you were asking about just strategy in the race, we're running a very grassroots on-the-ground campaign, which means it's really about getting out and with the people and knocking on doors and doing all the things that we do. So I think that's the strategy that we're going to continue to follow all the way to the end. I'm not having any of those discussions.
And don't intend to.
And I don't see any reason to.
Do you guys know who you're going to vote for in ranked choice voting? Other than yourself, well, obviously, Tony, you're your first choice. Do you have a second?
I'm going to wait and see who has the courage to stand up and say the right things, and that's going to be my second, third. I mean, I'm just waiting to see who really walks the walk, and I haven't seen it yet.
Joanna?
Well, I kind of like Wilma Pang singing. No, I'm kidding. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't think
I'm just focused on getting my message out to the voters.
Leland? So one thing I just want to bring up, the one thing, when you guys were talking about priorities, and I was asking you to be specific, Joanna, you mentioned it very briefly, but I think if you were to ask the people of this city, probably if you were to ask them to rank their priorities, no matter what, Muni shows up as number 1, 2, or 3. And none of you have mentioned really Muni or talked about Muni.
We talked about Muni in terms of figuring out how we innovate. And I've attended hackathons and transportation camp with a bunch of really great technologists that are really trying at it. It was an amazing event. In fact, they're doing a second one that it was people coming from all over the country that are trying to figure out how can we use technology and innovation, how can we put out information to come up with creative solutions to improve public transportation. And I would continue to promote those types of efforts. I absolutely believe that we need to create a platform where we put out as much information from inside City Hall, from Muni data, et cetera, to enable developers and creative entrepreneurs and individuals to come up to help us create new solutions. I always talk about kind of one that's kind of silly, but in Boston, it snows. And one of the problems in the snow is the fire hydrants get covered in snow. And it's dangerous because you can't, get the hose hooked up, or it costs a lot of money for the city to go around and dig up fire hydrants. And they put out the geolocation of every fire hydrant. And a technologist built a really cool little app called Adopt a Fire Hydrant. And people do that. And almost all the fire hydrants now are being dug out by individuals. You go click on the little app when you're done. You put the fire hydrant turns green. That means the snow's been uncovered. But finding solutions like that, where we're putting out data and looking for ways to improve things, we absolutely have to do, and Muni is absolutely right for it. The fact that we don't do demand-based routing, I ride a lot of buses, and I will tell you, there are certain places in the city where double buses go by with 3 people on them, and then if you go down to the Excelsior as an example, you can't even get on the bus. Or in the Bayview, I waited 40 minutes for the T line, and this morning at the N Judah, they came every 2 minutes for a while, and then it was a 15-minute break in between when it was supposed to come every 5 minutes. So there's a lot that can be done in terms of demand-based routing. There's the way that you do that, they have GPS in the actual bus. There's very low-cost sensors that you can put at the bus stops that you understand that there's a lot of people right there. These are not crazy innovations. These are just simple solutions that can be put into place to really improve the performance. And it goes back also to how I talked about budgeting. I mean, if we budget correctly, we'll make sure we maintain the investment in things that are critical to serving the needs of people in this community and stop funding things that are no longer meeting their intended purpose.
But one thing you've got to do with Muni and with City Hall in general is that you don't give out golden parachutes. $400,000. You know, can you imagine how much you can use with $400,000 to improve Muni? You know, I'm hoping that when I get my hands on Muni, that we're going to increase ridership by 100,000. I mean, the reality is that we've got to improve public transportation. That is the only way in which we're going to make San Francisco a lot more livable. If you somehow choke it with cars upon cars and cars, you know, it just would be unbearable. So public transportation is our only solution. But the question is, you know, how do you in fact, exercise fiscal discipline so that rather than giving it all to management, that you provide it to not only the riders, but also those individuals who work in the system, the drivers. And those are the kinds of issues. And then you've got to then figure out, you know, how, you know, that service that you provide, you know, whether or not is it safe, you know, is it effective and is it efficient. You can't send a child, you can't send your mother onto a bus not knowing whether or not your mother and your child is going to be safe at the end of the line. No one in their right mind would allow that to happen. So you've got to ensure that safety. You've got to also ensure that, you know, a half an hour bus ride is not going to take 2 hours. You know, those are the kinds of metrics that we've got to start looking at if we are, in fact, serious about public transportation. It's not enough to just simply say, we're transit first, and then just somehow assume that somehow someone's going to fix that. You've got to do that yourself.
Can I be very brief? Any constructive change with Muni has to start with the leadership. And we haven't had a mayor who's had the guts to make an appointment of someone who's got the experience since Michael Byrne. He had actual municipal transportation experience. It's been a political special assistant appointee of the mayor's office that has completely destroyed the system. You have to start at the top. A fish gets rotten from the head on down. And that's what's happened to Muni. We're certainly spending enough money. No amount of technology or innovation is going to change that white elephant until you get people in there that know what they're doing and understand the nuances of transportation in San Francisco. And that's what's happening. You cannot make a political appointment of an agency that large. So it starts with the top. It's the mayor's job to find the right person for that job who actually understands transportation with all the technology and the entrepreneurship and all that malarkey. You got to get a guy there who's got the guts to say, okay, drivers, you're going to do this. Here's the way the schedule you're going to keep on. Who is an administrator, but a guy who's experienced in that field.
Last question.
So, money is always a big issue in the campaigns in terms of who's trying to influence the candidates. The campaign finance filings only tell a very small portion of the picture. So, I'd like to ask each of you if you would be willing to disclose who is on your campaign finance or fundraising committee. If sometimes people get hung up on the semantics of whether they're so organized to have such a thing. If you don't have one, would you be willing to share with us who has hosted fundraisers for you, and we'll do so in the future?
We actually put all that information on our website.
Oh.
In terms of who's hosting a fundraiser, we list our fundraisers with a list of co-hosts. We allow people to sign up for them, if just people who come to the site. So we've been incredibly open about that from day one.
Do you have an actual campaign finance committee?
Me?
Okay, so you don't have anyone designated.
I have people, finance people within our campaign team internally, but in terms of an outside committee, no.
Tony?
You're looking at the finance committee. We've worked with people that hosted parties that we paid them for it. Our campaign is, as I said from the beginning, is going to the people. I'd rather get $100 from Mom and Pa Kettle, or as somebody said last week, the art people, whatever, than say $500 from 5 different sources. I really believe that the people have to weigh in on this. That's what we're emphasizing. I don't have a structured finance committee. I have a campaign. I have a fundraiser working with me. We've disclosed everything that we've done. People have not really hosted fundraisers and paid for them. We've had 3 or 4 different fundraisers in different locations where we've paid because I don't want to be obligated. I'm certainly not taking money from anybody connected with the status quo or the machine that's operating the city, because I want to be an effective mayor and I want to be independent of that. I experienced that when I was a supervisor, and let me tell you, I don't want to even go near that. I don't want the job if I have to kowtow to these clowns that are running the city.
We have a finance person, we don't have a finance committee, and all the different events that we have are like I think Joanna, and that is we post it on the website, inviting whoever and anybody that wants to participate that they can participate.
But certainly you have people who are helping you fundraise, people who host certain events that are at the top of the invite who are bigger names. I don't know. I'm guessing maybe labor or it. So I'm just asking if would you be willing to share
You can talk to Stearns, and he'll give you whatever information you need. We don't for all the different events that we have, it's laid out there who's hosting it and who's co-hosting it, and that's all out there.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for
Appreciate
your
it.
questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You guys are very insightful. Your questions, your defense.
And I'm just seeing you again.
Thank you.
Oh, holy